So I come from Canada originally. I was born and I grew up in Ottawa, which is the nation's capital. Uh, Jumping forward, I've been a drummer all my life. I started playing when I was 6 years old. My father played, my aunts and uncles played. So it was natural to be involved with music. I was playing in clubs when I was 15, and I was doing studio work by the time I was 17. I was taking journalism at college, and one day a friend of mine needed to borrow a tennis racket. I dropped it off, and he was working at a film studio in the sound department. I walked in. I saw the mixing console, which was pretty basic at that time, and I saw the film up there, and I went, oh my God, this is what I want to do. It hit me like just a ton of bricks, and I haven't looked back. And I have the same sense of passion today that I had when it hit me. I can't wait to go to work. I'm scared of new jobs. I still get nervous about stuff, even though I've been doing it longer than the director or anybody else on the show. And I just absolutely love it. And I remember that day when it just hit me, and thank God it happened. When I first started working, it was for a industrial documentary filmmaker who, it was the largest documentary film company in the world. Canadians are kind of known for their documentaries. And as an industrial, what they called industrials back then was they were sponsored films for large commercial entities. And what I mean by large is like Mobil Exxon or the U.S. Army or Boeing or whatever, you know. And back then, this was before videotape. We actually shot industrials in 35 millimeter. And so the quality was incredible. In a lot of instances, we were taking on huge engineering projects like the St. James Power Project, which is the largest dam power project, and I mean dam, you know, in the right sense, project in the world. It actually supplies the power for all the northeast U.S. But what would happen was you would go for like a week every 6 months and shoot some more footage, and you would update the film, and the shareholders meetings would show these films as updates because, you know, they didn't have videotape. It wasn't accessible as it is now, information. So that was a tremendous learning experience. That in itself took me pretty much all over the world. I started out being, you know, foisted a Nagra on my chest, and I was a production mixer. And told, you know, this is the level, and this is stick the mic in as close as you can, and all that sort of stuff. I ended up in the North Pole. I ended up in Africa, Asia, South America, you know, all over the place. It was a tremendous education. It was probably one of the best educations for starting in the business where you're getting to work with a director when you're shooting, not just meeting a director in post-production, but when you're shooting and getting that sensibility of what they're looking for and how they're having to deal with situations that are brought up and appear and how they have to deal with them. And then it gives you a different sensibility when you start doing post-production and you realize all the problems that they've gone through. It's just amazing that they actually got to post-production. I'm wondering. So I was doing that. The owner of the industrial documentary company dabbled in feature films because they were pretty successful as a company. And whilst I was there, we made a film called The Man Who Skied Down Everest. And it's the story of Yoshiro Miura. It actually won the Academy Award in 1975. I think it was, for the best feature documentary. I actually, when I started with the company, I was given this project. Here, go and record some effects and stuff. And I ended up doing all the sound on this documentary, and it won the Academy Award, and it gave me a real insight as to what that was all about at a very young age. The next project was Janis. It was the life of Janis Joplin. And because of my musical background, the head of the sound department said, she's a rock and roll chick. You can do this. Like, okay, fine and dandy. And ended up overdubbing a bunch of stuff and getting all the original tracks that were recorded on the tour that she was on, and all different tours, putting it all together. And it was a feature film about Janis Joplin, and it was my first foray into not a documentary so much as a real musical feature film. And that was a great education, and it allowed me to interact with a lot of people in the music business. The next strange thing that happened was going back to the pictures. I got a phone call one day, and it was somebody saying they represented Bob Dylan, and Bob wanted to talk to me. And I'm sitting there. I was like 23 years old, and I'm like, yeah, right, sure. But in fact, he wanted to get back to the people, and he wanted to start out little small clubs in New England, and send his message out. And would I be interested in doing the sound, because I've done some things that he was aware of, both Janis and The Man Who Skied Down Everest. He was aware of. And he quite often worked with a filmmaker named Howard Ulk. Ulk, Pennebaker, Maisels, they were sort of leaders in that whole cinema verite movement. And I had been working with Howard Ulk quite a bit, and so he had proffered my name. And I ended up in New York like a month later at SIR Studios, and rehearsing for this tour that started out theoretically small and ended up at Madison Square Gardens and at the Montreal Forum, and it became a year-long tour, and we traveled all over the place. Actually, the second leg of the tour, we went to Japan, and it was huge. My introduction to California was actually after the tour finished. We had all these 24-track tapes. We had shot a film at the same time and recorded and shot the tour, recorded all the tapes. Hurricane Carter came out of that. Hard Rain, the album, came out of that also. And we had recorded all this material on the road, and I was brought to California to mix it down because I had recorded the stuff. And my introduction to California was living at Bob Dylan's house in Point Dume, and Bob wasn't there, so I was like sitting in this pool overlooking the ocean, and like, this is phenomenal. I'm not going back. But of course I did. But what was great was I was introduced to Danny Wallen at Warner Brothers. Danny is now 83 years old. He's still scoring. Yeah. And he's a phenomenal scoring mixer. And I had the good fortune to work with him on the mixdowns at Warner Brothers in the scoring stage control room. And that was my introduction to California. I thought I'd gone to heaven. This was fabulous. I thought, I'm going to do my best to try and get sponsored and get down here. It's not easily done, especially then. It was very difficult. But I ended up with Don Rogers from Warner Brothers being my sponsor. And I ended up starting at Ryder Sound Services on Vine Street. And Clem Portman had just passed away. That was Richard Portman's father. Richard Portman, like a great mixer in Hollywood. His father passed away. He had been mixing music with George Porter, father of Terry Porter and the group. If you know your history at all, these are all sort of like big name mixers that have been around for a long time. And so Leo had been in touch with Don Rogers. He says, I got this kid, I got a sponsor. And he brought me into Ryder, and I started mixing music for George Porter. And Terry Porter was starting to mix effects with his father, and so I was mixing music. And one day, George Porter said to Leo, there's a stereo mix coming in. And Leo goes, yeah. He says, Well, I haven't told you for a couple of years now. I lost the hearing in my left ear altogether, and I can only hear mono. Because up to that point, everybody'd been just mixing mono. I was trying to get an overview of the whole history of sound and its progression over the years in Hollywood. And through all those interviews, I would take them out to dinner and just pester them with questions and whatnot. And throughout those, there was a certain commonality, and that was they all felt that Stage S at the CBS Radford lot was the best place they worked at. And some actually said for the right reasons because it sounded phenomenal, and others were like, "Oh, they got the best restaurants in that area." You know, everybody's version of what defines a really good place is different. Having joined Tadeo Glen, just when Tadeo had bought Glen, I really rallied and tried to get myself positioned over at Stage S, and I did. It was an incredibly abysmal place, a studio at the time. It was very old-fashioned, really behind the time with the board. When it rained, there was a mist that filled the room. It was a strange place, but we slowly poured money into it, fixed it up, and it got to the point where it was probably easily one of the two best-sounding rooms in LA for many, many years. I stayed there for 16 years. I really didn't want to leave. I loved it there. And they were right. The restaurants were better. Also, through that time, my kids were born, and I ended up being a single father. And so I ended up living 2 blocks away. It made it really easy to bicycle to work and get home and, all that sort of stuff. And the kids grew up on the lot. During that time, Tadeo serviced an awful lot of the Paramount clientele. C.C. Hall was in charge, pretty much, and Paul Hager, the infamous Paul Hager. And I ended up doing an awful lot of Paramount work there. Also, one of my key clients, if you've ever had an opportunity to look at the IMDb and the list of credits that I have, there's at least 18 pictures that I did with Ivan Reitman. An awful lot. That started back in Canada. In Toronto, okay, I'm going to take a really quick aside, but this is kind of like really cogent to the whole, film experience. But Ivan was coming in with a film called Meatballs, and he came in, and I was going to do it, and I ended up doing the Foley, the pre-dubs, the scoring with Elmer Bernstein, the mix, everything. Just did it all, and it was a great experience. But when he first came in, he came into the lobby, and there's these like arched windows, and you're looking out over what street was it? Adelaide? I can't remember. Anyway, and there's a car wash right across the street. And so he's standing there looking down, and I wave to the little old man who's standing in front of the car wash. I said to Ivan, "I'm sorry, but I said, that's the owner." And I waved to him, almost every day. And Ivan looked at me and he goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's my father."
Oh.
Good choice.
It was just, that's who I am. That's who he was, And so 18 pictures following, And a matter of fact, just like 2 years ago, we did the DVD 5.1 re-release of Meatballs, and he phoned me up. He says, you got to do this. So like, okay, great. And it was like a lot of fun. So that brings me to, doing a lot of Paramount stuff, a lot of Ivan Reitman stuff at Stage S. I was there a long time. We actually Tadeo ended up buying the scoring stage and turning it into one of the best scoring stages there. It was a fantastic experience. Whilst I was there, we did the Rolling Stones at the Max, which was the IMAX version of the Steel Wheels tour. And I got to work with both Keith and Mick. It was a great experience once again. As much as I've always done film work, and I'm sort of known, I think, as a dialogue mixer, as dialogue music, but everybody's like, oh yeah, you do dialogue. It's like, I always viewed myself as a music mixer that does dialogue. I've mixed a lot of stuff for Hall & Oates, and I was with Bob Dylan. I did the Rolling Stones thing, and to this day, I'm getting files sent to me from artists in Nashville, and I'm mixing albums at home. I'm just making sure that they don't see a picture of me, and they don't know that I'm not 27 years old. And so I just mix it, send it back, hope you like it, and I must say it's almost like a hobby still, where they're sending me these files to do album work now, not realizing that it's like I'm up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, sitting there in my room, mixing away and having the time of my life. And it's like, I'd be doing this without, thank you for sending me the files, because it's like, wow, this is great. I get to do this. So music has been as much a part of my whole experience in and out of the music business, or how the music relates to the film business. Both. And I still play. I have a massive set of custom-made DW drums that are all mic'd at home, and I play almost daily. And I have a very sort of high-profile client, Steve Zalian. He's a writer-producer. Once in a while, he directs. And he has a band that plays every 2 weeks, and I'm the guy. I'm the drummer, and it's just great fun. And I just keep at him all the time saying, "I wish you'd direct more because you're a lousy client." But so I'm still stuck in with the music thing. When in 2000, Liberty Media took over Todd AO and Sound Deluxe and that whole thing. And I decided to leave. There were things that were going on politically that I just was not in favor of. So I went to Sony. And they were opening a new room called the Lancaster Theater. And so myself and Greg Orloff teamed up, and we opened that room. The first film I did at Sony was Charlie's Angels for Betty Thomas. I've done a lot of Betty Thomas's material, a lot of her stuff. Matter of fact, Ivan Reitman introduced me to Betty, and Betty liked me because I would allow her dogs on the stage. As I said before, you'll find there's a certain thread, and that is that, there's no rhyme or reason for why you have relationships or you have a certain client. It always changes, And Betty and I are still very close friends at this point. She's gone through quite a few dogs since. But and she produced Charlie's Angels, so I that was my first film over at Sony. We opened that room. We did a number of pictures there, and then we opened another room called the Quinn, which was a unique experience in a unique room. Did a number of pictures there. Then I moved over to the Holden, which is a really large room, one of the finest sounding rooms in town. And I can only compare it to Stage S. And when I got into that room, for such a large room, quite often the bigger the room, the more anomalies that you may find. But some rooms have soul, and that was one of them. Just like Stage S, where even though it was a extremely large amount of air, a lot of cubic footage, but it does not have odd slaps. It has a really nice natural decay. It's not overly live at all. And you can sit anywhere in the room and it sounds the same. It's just like very rare for a big room, because usually you swing your chair over from one side of the board to the other, and like, that's not what I was hearing over there. I've been in small rooms that sound like that. It's like, don't move your head to the left or the right too much. So the Holden was an outstanding room. Plus, at that time, Sony was keeping up to date with their technology. And so I was benefited by the fact that we were always had the newest and hippest stuff. It's a large sound department. I could ask for outboard equipment and whatever I wanted, and you got it. It was really a nice experience. In 2009, I'm getting very close to now. In 2009, I left there, and I left there for political reasons. Quite honestly. And it was almost like, wow, what an incredibly terrible time to leave a company like Sony, not knowing that so much would crash and everything would change. And that was like, oh, what bad timing. On the other hand, I felt at the time that I was being pigeonholed for a number of years into doing just comedies, mostly romantic comedies. I didn't feel like I was getting a wide range of material. A lot of guys are pigeonholed into, this guy does action, this guy does comedy, this guy does horror films, blah, blah. And up until about 2004, I had done a really wide range. If you look at the IMDb, there's like documentaries, there's musical, there's comedies, there's, big action pictures. There's a whole wide range. And Taddeo always fed you a wide range. And when I got to Sony, they were slowly pigeonholing me. And I got to a point where after Kevin O'Connell left, I thought, well, good, I might get some, decent project. Instead of which they brought other people in. So consequently, I just said, okay, I've had enough of this and I'm leaving. Bad idea. The business just sort of has, tanked for a long time since that time. But I've also come to realize that even there and everywhere else, everybody's going through the same, thing. In 50-50. He's driven up in front of the hospital. He's going to go in to have his operation, and Seth Rogen has just driven him up. And Seth is always making light of everything. He's making a sort of a joke out of everything because he's feeling really emotional, but he's not letting on. And so they're saying goodbye in the car, and he's going to go out to the hospital, and then he's going to just go park the car, and he'll meet him inside. And during that scene, they give a sort of a semi-awkward hug, because that's like sort of like not who they are, But it's the hug, and our main guy gets out and he leaves the car and he closes the door. And up until that point, there's been a little bit of music, but there's atmosphere, et cetera, et cetera. And as the door closed, I just went, and I took everything out. Nothing left. Nothing. And I thought to myself, his world just went away. He's just like, and it says everything. And then on the next cut, we're in the hospital, bam, right? Just right. So you hit it hard. You don't fade it back in or anything. You just hit it hard. But you've made a statement. And it's that sort of like, not experimentation, but it's being allowed to communicate to the fullest degree what the scene can possibly say. There's a film called Searching for Bobby Fischer, that he did years ago, and it's about a little kid, Josh Waiskin, who's a chess genius. And he goes to the parks and he plays against the old guys, and he goes to tournaments and champions. And I remember Bob Grieve phoned me up one day. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing this film about chess." I said, "It's really good sounding." He says, "What, loud chess pieces falling over?" And I was like, not quite. But what was great was that, yes, there was good music, but a lot of times the scene was, different scenes started out with what I call the soup or the glue, where the backgrounds are sitting you in a place. And throughout that film, manipulation of those backgrounds really sort of focused you, took you back, manipulated you a great deal. And it was the quality, the thinness or the thickness, or how you focused it or how wide you made it around you, that really kept you in that film. It's not an action film, quite obviously. It's a real academic film, as a matter of fact, more than anything else, and a lot of emotion. But just being able to have that canvas to work with and being able to utilize it. Steve Zalian directed that film, as a matter of fact. And that was an absolute joy to work on because we were given rein. And the third one, which is, I think, my favorite job that I've ever done for many reasons, but one of the main ones is what we're talking about, just being allowed to be very, I guess it's partially experimental, but also expressive. And that was a film called Pleasantville.
Oh, that's a great, yeah.
And what it allowed to do with the sound was directly related to how he shot the film. Because as some of you may know, it starts out all black and white. And it stays black and white until each person has an awakening. And so they have color. And as things blossom and become alive, the color appears. And so we start with a very sort of mono track, and it allowed us to build atmospheres. It allowed us to widen the scape. And even the music, we were using some of the best jazz music and stuff. And the score, Thomas Newman, not Thomas, Randy Newman did the score. He did a beautiful score. But what was great was the director was Gary Ross. And I would say, that the score comes in and they're looking at a book and the pictures in the book are coming to life. They're becoming color. And this soda jerk, the soda fountain guy, is starting to see the pictures in color. And he starts turning the pages. And the music came in at a certain point. And I said, Gary, I got to do something here. Hold on a second. And I shifted the music and I took a phrase and I shifted that one phrase. I cross-mixed them. And it started at a different point. And now all of a sudden it had 3 meanings because he was looking at it with this woman. It was the color and it was about him too. So there was three levels in which you could take this. And when it started at one point, it was about the book coming alive. When it started at another point, it joined the 3 themes. And I said, I want to do this. And working with a director like that, he sat there and he started crying. I'm like, yes, that's what I want, And when I'm mixing music, and if it's supposed to make you cry, if I fade out and I'm just putting everything, my heart and soul into it, I'm just making all those, oh my God, fading it out. And I turn around and somebody says yeah, that's good. I'm like, let me work on it again. And I want to do it like that, and I want to hear nothing but tears in the room. And I'm like, okay, now we can move on, And it's that's when you're putting your heart and soul into it. That's when you're allowed to become part of the filmmaking process and not a technician. Surprisingly enough, I've done a lot of comedies, and a lot of comedies are all about timing and knowing when to move a line so that it's more either funnier or starts to take on a different meaning. It's not only funny, but it's got this other oblique sensibility. And I feel quite often, without that being a heartfelt sentiment thing, it's more important for me to be able to hit that mark with a comedy where it's not just blatant. It's got a little more meaning, and people are laughing inside and not out loud, not guffaw. They're laughing inside and whoa, did you get that? That's what I want in a comedy. And quite often, I think to a great extent, one of the reasons why I've done a lot of comedies is because the understanding of that sense of rhythm and timing and what it can mean. It's not just a matter of, no, that's not quite right. It's also a matter of what does it mean if it hits at the right time or slightly off the right time. I think having done a lot of comedy, even when I was in Toronto, I was doing SCTV. I think working with a lot of comedians, going to stand-up comedy and stuff like that's one thing. Also, I'm a counter. There are people that count everything. If I go upstairs, I count. 12. Hit the platform. Another 8. It's just a mental thing. I just count everything, so that when somebody says, "Do you think we should move that?" Yes, 14 frames. Oh. It's just it's in my head. It's just it's happening all the time. And you get after a while, you get a sense of timing that you don't even have to experiment. It should be there, and it should be there because there is the right spot. This is the oblique proper spot, and it's a whole decision. It's a whole discussion that you have in your head that takes place instantaneously. But it's also, as you go back to the drumming thing, whereas if you're a jazz fusion drummer, there are things that you do as a drummer that sometimes people are like, that's interesting. That's a little off, that's a little off timing. And it's like, yes, I was thinking of that on purpose. And I wanted you to feel a certain way. I either want you to be in the groove or I want you to be like thinking about it and intellectualizing the piece. I don't want you to be grooving, And it's like those decisions you make as you go. Because I'm pretty much known as a dialogue and ADR mixer to a great extent, and I think one of my specialities has been over the years is ADR matching, which I think I've probably hit as good as I can get. But I wanted to address that in very real terms because some of you are mixers, some of you are sound people, etc. And as much as we have to keep that overall dynamic in mind and the storytelling and stuff like that, I'm going to assume that, as people in the film business, that you have that in mind all the time. But sometimes what grounds us in a certain reality is not being able to hit a certain sound that's pleasant, and it's distracting. And if you've got a mismatch or something is not cleaned out nicely, et cetera, or there's a certain timbre that's just awkward, that's very technical, and it's taking us out of the ability to tell the story beautifully, and it's encumbering the whole situation. So to a certain extent, there's like 50%, and I don't know, the percentages vary all the time, but 50% is like that whole storytelling, filmmaking, communicating to the audience, et cetera. And then there's how you do it technologically best to make it work for that. Because they go hand in hand, and in fact, you can't split them up 50-50. That percentage always varies. But this is why I'm addressing it, is that a lot of people just don't ever give you formulas. They always talk about esoteric stuff. It's like, yeah, you should really try and match the ADR. It's like, no shit. You can't. I go and watch sometimes in other stages, and an ADR line comes up, and I'm like, and I look over, the mixer's still mixing, and I'm looking at the director looking at the picture editor, and they're both going like that. And I'm like, dude, if you couldn't hear it, and if you don't sense that they're just like doing this, you're fucked. I mean, it's like you're out of touch, right? And if it bothers me, it's going to bother them. So I'm going to start to hit some certain things that, once again, are a little more technical, and sometimes in a sort of oblique way, they're kind of esoteric. First thing I'm going to talk about is sound pressure level. This is like what you would call the volume, what some people call the volume or the loudness of the film. And we call it sound pressure level because it is based on pressure. If one mixes on the basis, and this is kind of like a little tough to grasp, I think, unless you're all brilliant and I'm dumb, but and that's a distinct possibility. But somebody brought this out to me back in 1985. Klaus Wiedemann from Germany. He was the Dolby rep. And one day he said, your sound pressure level is inconsistent. And I was like, say what? And he said, you're mixing based on volume, not sound pressure level. I'm like, right. Okay, back to Germany. But it took me about 3 years. I remember like 3 years later going, But I was, for that whole time, I was working on trying to get an understanding of what that meant. It changed everything about my mixing, and it gave me an understanding of where what a lot of guys call it, where the pocket is, and where you have to live as a dialogue mixer, and what that reference point means for the overall sound of the film. And the 8 or 12 key dialogue mixers in the country all know where that pocket is. And everybody else doesn't. And they're looking for it. They're trying to find it. They're missing the mark. And sometimes they're hitting it. And you're going, you know. But what, to me, the best way I could describe it is that there's a certain amount of pressure that comes off the screen. And fortunately, we're really lucky, not in the music business, but we're really lucky. We work at 85 dB in a theater, and that's a constant. The theater, the speakers are spec'd out, so if you're in a near field, it might be 82, but at least it's going to be consistent. You're not, and you shouldn't be, okay? But because of that, you should feel a certain amount of pressure on you when the dialogue is being played. And that pressure should be relatively very close to consistent. And when you can make a whisper come at you at that point, and then a yell come at you just a little further. But what I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, it should be sitting here, and when I want somebody yelling and pushing you back, I want to bring it forward, but I want to bring it just to the point where their head is moving like this. And I don't want that. But I just want to pull it forward so it's like, And then if I want to pull somebody in and bring them into the scene before the gunshot goes off, I'll pull it back just a bit and I'll bring them forward. But I'm never passed in and out of about a 3 dB dynamic. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about is pressure level, right? Now, here's the key. When I go off that pressure level for one word, one sentence, that's when you're going to get, could you bring that line up? Oh, could you bring that line down? That's where the comments come from. And I won't get that. Haven't gotten it for years because I will stop before that comment comes because I've heard it. I felt the pressure level go off. Okay? So this is what you're going to get with Terry Porter, with Kevin O'Connell, with Paul Massey. You know, there's guys, they're putting that dialogue here as a reference point. Now, once you've got that dialogue as a reference point, you've now established the playground for the effects and the music. Okay? So it's all relative to that. And that's one of the reasons why the dialogue mixer is what they call the gaffing mixer on the stage, is because it's all relative to how much something encroaches or departs from the dialogue. You don't move the dialogue down and up. You move the other stuff around and you put that dialogue where it belongs so that the audience doesn't have to work. Now, over the last dozen years or something like that, we've lost an awful lot of that. And so consequently, we go to pictures now and it's like, I didn't understand a word they said. Yes. Or, man, that was really garbled. I didn't get that scene. What were they saying? That's because the mixers aren't aware of how to get that clarity and that pressure level consistent. Yes. Okay? You're hired. So that's the beginning. And if you can get to that point, you've done a lot, I can tell you. It'll make it a lot easier for your clients. It'll make it a lot easier for you because you will now buy yourself credibility with them because you hear, before they say something, you've heard it, stopped, and gone and fixed it. And they're like, oh, shit, I don't have to say anything. You can choose to make a whole track sound a certain way if you know how to do it. A lot of people don't know how to do it. And they're just, they've got a noisy track and the editor or the director says, could you raise that line? And they literally go, okay. And they raise the line. And they've just raised a whole bunch of noise. And there's no more clarity. Is that okay? A little bit more? Because you actually haven't satisfied what the intent was. Because when they say, raise that line, and of course, 85% of our job is being able to interpret. When somebody goes, yeah, I really like that, you know that they didn't like it at all. You know? That's fine. It's like, come on, that's obvious. You know, that's called interpreting, right? When somebody says, no, raise it a little bit more, it's like, you missed the intention here. I need to hear, understand, clarity, the line more. Raising it's not going to do that. It's our responsibility to say, how about just give me a couple of passes here? Rather than raising it, I'm going to try and make a little more clarity. Just give me 2 seconds and it's going to be just great. They're like, oh, okay, can't you just raise it? I could, but it's not going to satisfy what you need, because what you need is to understand the line more, right? It's like, yeah. It's like, well, there's so much noise on it. I got to work on cleaning out that noise a little more and getting a little more edge on it so it's easier for the ear to understand. And maybe it's not necessarily going to have to be louder. It'll just now be the same level, same pressure level, but clearer. Let me try that. Oh, okay. By the way, never ever say the word no on a dub stage. And your best friend as a word is the word experiment. Because nobody in the creative process is going to say, no, you can't experiment. Like, what sort of an asshole are you in the creative business? But if you say, would you mind terribly if I just experiment with this for a second? I have some ideas. Oh, yeah, go ahead. You're trying to add something good to it, right? Can I go back and fix that? No, it's fine. Right? Big difference. So there are certain words that buy you time and space and some that don't. When I start dialogue, pre-dub, for instance, and you're setting up the board, right? And you usually, most people, if you're smart, set up the board where obvious eventualities are being addressed before you even start. In other words, you choose a bunch of different verbs, you have them ready to go, you've got your sends ready to go just to pop on, and you've got a small room, a medium room, a long, slap or something like that. But you've got a bunch of programs all set up, so it's right there. You don't hear something, go, oh, I need so-and-so, and then start dicking around. It's like you set up your whole process in advance, like having some EQ ready to go, some compression ready to go, some noise reduction ready to go of some sort, a bunch of things that you get set up. Well, when I start, generally speaking, I will listen to maybe 4 lines of the recording, just like quick and easy, because production mixer is going to be recording at the same level, pretty close to the same level all the time. He's going to be at least trying for it. And so I'm like, okay, fine and dandy. Generally speaking, I will trim the gain up on the fader by either 8 to 10 dB. Right off the bat, I'm going to give myself more level to play with. Then I'm going to try and take the microphone out. Generally speaking, most microphones between 800 and 1100 cycles have a honkiness and a masking that sounds like the microphone. When you go to clubs or a concert, there is a certain sound that PAs make, okay? And it's like the PA sound, right? And strangely enough, no matter how advanced we get technologically, you still get that PA sound. It's because the mixers are going for that PA sound because that's what they're used to, instead of going for like a real high fidelity sound. And every once in a while, you come across a band where the mixer is actually going for a high fidelity sound. You're like, wow, is that ever great? But the rest of them have the same tools and they're not going for it. Well, what I'm saying is that most of the microphones, the Sheps and everything that they're using are within a certain range. They're going to have masking frequencies in there that are going to give a certain honk or certain sound effect, right? So now I've raised my level on all my faders for the dialogue 8 to 10 dB. I'm now going to pull out on a fairly wide cue, not really narrow, and not overly wide, but a smooth cue. I'm going to pull out to start with 1K 8 dB.
Really?
A minimum, and I'm telling you, I'm starting there because that's my minimum. I will go to 14 or 16 dB of yanking that out. Okay? Now, because I've raised the gain on the fader, I can now put the fader at 0, right? And I've taken a whole lot of crap out, and I've made a certain clarity to the dialogue that, gee, this really does sound like George. This sounds like the person's in the room. All right? Not sounding like a microphone is in between us. Okay? So that's number 1. Number 2, I use cedars an awful lot. You can use WNS, you can use whatever. Actually, I like the WNS plugin better than the Cedars plugin. I like the Cedars, the outboard Cedars better than the WNS plugin. But I always start out with a certain, graph on that. And that is the very lowest band. I take a lot out, not all out, but a lot out. The second band, which is like a chest band, I leave at 0. The next 2 bands, which are in the middle, I pull down about a good 4 to 6 dB there. And then the last 2 bands, I leave at 0, the top end. So I'm just pulling, once more, just a lot of crap out, but not a ton. When I'm doing the dialogue, I try to clean out as much crap in the dialogue as I can, get a beautiful sound from the person's voice. I don't want to compromise. I don't want to pull so much crap out, background ambience or whatever, that I hear pumping. I don't want to hear pumping, but I will take it to the point where I start to hear the pumping and back it off. Now I know I've maximized that noise floor to the signal. Okay, guess where the music and the effects play. They play between that floor and that pressure level of the dialogue. That's their dynamic. That's where they play. If I don't clean that stuff out and I don't make that clarity with the dialogue, not only will it not pop, the backgrounds and everything else have to come down, play the music lower because it's encroaching on the dialogue, because I don't understand it, I don't hear it. So my biggest directive when I'm dialogue pre-dubbing is to get that window, that dynamic between that signal and that noise floor as much as I can without pumping, without compromising like a weird honky sound, get the honk out. You get some microphones and some people, it's like I'm taking like 2200 or something like that with an hour cue, and I'm just taking it right down, and it opens right up, and I can raise the level, and it's like, shit, that was a crappy recording. That really sounded like shit. But I found the frequency really quickly, and there it is. Now, after you've been looking for frequencies to take out like that, you'll realize, number one, I don't have to add. When you add, you're using the equalizer as an amplifier. And when you add top end, because you haven't taken away the masking frequencies, when you add top end, all of a sudden people are going, oh, ow, oh, that hurts, because you're falsely adding top. Whereas if you take the masking frequencies out and then you raise the pressure level to make, that's called a makeup gain, now all of a sudden it's like, that's really pleasant and I understand everything. Right? Now, once in a while, you might have to add a little bit of top end, but ultimately, very, very little. Just a little more detail or a little more clarity or something like that. But not like, 8 dB at 5K or something like that. It's like, when you see that, it's like, whoa, maybe I should be addressing something else. There are certain rules that are not rules, but they're what I call flags. It's like, whoa, something's wrong. I better check this out. Why am I clipping? Well, maybe my level versus the compression threshold is off. Certain things are like little flags, right? When you're doing this with the EQs and you're looking for those masking frequencies, it's going to take you 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it takes. Because if you're doing it every day, all the time, it takes less time. If you're doing it once in a while, it takes more time. But when you start doing that, it gets to a point where you don't have to go looking for it. You hear it, you know where it is. Wow, there it is. It takes 2 seconds. It takes 2 seconds. When you're starting out, it takes a lot longer, and people are, why are you're killing me? You're taking so long to do this. But ultimately, you get to the point where you're doing it so fast, everybody thinks, well, he didn't touch anything. Because the way I set it up, and because I just have to take another 2 dB of 1K, or I just have to shift that 1K to 850. Because I heard it just down a little lower, the masking frequency. But ultimately, it takes me 2 seconds, right? And it's just happening. And you got this clarity. And then I've had literally somebody else do, what do they call it? They add scenes to a DVD, later on, the added scenes or whatever. And I've literally gotten calls from the mixers going, I cannot match this production, and it was shot at the same time. It's an extended scene. I can't match it at all. What did you do? And I tell them, they're like, what? Are you kidding? And then they do it. They go, wow, that's great. It sounds like crazy, but it works. Okay. So once again, going to that flag thing, if you're working on a board that shows you the frequencies and what it looks like, don't look at it because it'll scare the shit out of you. I mean, I've got stuff happening, and if I look at it, I go, whoa. Okay, don't look, because if it sounds right, if it sounds working great, because all frequencies interrelate, and it's not just harmonics, but they all interrelate. There's actually a director that insists that all the production dialogue be recorded in with an XY pair, and it's horrific.
Yes.
It's totally horrific. And, there's a reason why Danny Wallen at 83 and Armin Steiner at 80 are still doing all the big scores because they get it. And not everybody gets it. And unfortunately, we've gotten to a point where there's less and less mentoring. There's less and less apprenticeship. That's partially because the corporations don't want to afford it where they used to. And partially because the older guys don't want the younger kids stealing their work, and then they're afraid of the new technology. And the third reason is because some of the younger kids think they know everything. That's nothing new, but it's more pervasive than it used to be. Mentoring goes both ways. And that's one of the things I wanted to leave tonight with. But it goes both ways. And we cannot lose sight of that no matter what stage of the cycle you're in. Some of you guys are really young, some of you are older. Whatever cycle you're in, you have something to give, you have something to learn. I have been doing this 42 years. I think maybe 43, I'm cheating. But I have a guy who's 33 years old that I played golf with one day at the MPSCs. And we said, we're not going to talk about sound. We were all depressed. Everybody was depressed. And we're not going to talk about sound. We're just going to play golf. Like, okay, fine. So we played golf. We had a great day. And the other two golfers were like big names, fabulous guys. And we had a great time. And then after that, this young guy, 33-year-old for me is a young guy, he called me up and he said, I have questions. And, given that we just spent like a day together and had fun, do you mind if we meet up and I have questions? Absolutely. It ended up, he has his own studio with a large icon and a whole, JBL system. It's all Dolby, blah, blah. It's like this. And I go over to his place and we start chatting and everything else. And for the last, about 2.5 years now, we've done so much work together. And he last night called me up at midnight and said, could you come over? I need some advice. He knows that I'm up late. So I'll be right over. Drove over to his place, sat down. He played some dialogue. We talked about stuff. I suggested, because we were talking about earlier, I can just call stuff out. I just hear it. I don't have to go finding it. I just call. So I just sat there. I just called stuff out. And he just smiled and just shook his head. And he's like, thank you. It's like, okay, see you later. On the other hand, I get emails from him constantly saying, try this plugin, try that plugin, try these settings. It's like, really, this is really cool. Don't bother with this one. Have you looked at this lately? This is how you do this. He's teaching me so much, and I've got to the point where I don't feel like I'm an old guy anymore. We have to educate the directors and the picture editors. Those two are the people that control our lives. Picture editors think they know all about sound. They don't know shit.
Amen.
Okay? And they don't even have good taste. But they think that they are going to control everything. Now that the director is so busy doing color timing or working on CGI shots, even more so because the picture editor thinks he has been entitled to run the mix and knows exactly what the director wants until the director walks in and goes, what the hell is this shit? Okay? And that's when usually the picture editor's in the corner like this, which I've seen many times. And they'll be yelling at you. I want this. I want it exactly like my Avid. et cetera, which here's part of the problem, and this is part of the education thing, is that one of the things that we have to teach them is that, look, you can't be saying to me, use my automation. It's exactly how I want it. First question should be, first response might be, I'm most happy to use your automation because it will eliminate a lot of me guessing at what you were trying to do. Thank you. And they're usually, first of all, taking a little bit of unawares, a little defense, and they say, but I have just a quick question. And what's that? Did you have a consistent monitor level at all times? Was that monitor level absolutely consistent? Well, some scenes are low level, I turn the monitor up, and some scenes I say, my monitor level does not change. Consequently, you are going to say, before it even happens, you should defeat this. Before we start, let me tell you that I have to work on it with a consistent monitor level. Consequently, you are going to say to me, that's not my automation. You've heard it a million times. That's not how I automate. If I listen in my room, that's not how I automate. Well, first of all, this is the new reference point. This is the room that we're mixing in. That's number one. And secondly, I have a consistent monitor level that I have to abide by. Consequently, yes, you're going to find your automation doesn't work the same way as you think it was working but I will tell you what, I will try to listen to your automation and divine the intention behind what you were trying to do and replicate it as best I can. Ultimately, what we have to do is be aware that it is as important for us to educate them as to what we're doing. They've all felt like that they don't see what we're doing. They don't see how much we're putting into it. They don't hear what we're doing. Consequently, they think we've done nothing and that they've done all the work in their room. They don't even know that you're fixing it all. And if you don't let them know, it's like a kid, If you don't let them know, they're unaware. And so you get the ignorant comments of, just raise it. It's like, just for what it's worth, excuse me for a second. You want more clarity with that line. Is that correct? Yes. It's like, okay, then just give me a couple of seconds and I'll get more clarity on that line. Can't you just raise it? Yes, I could, but it won't get you what you want. So let me give me a couple of seconds, right? You have to be really nice about it and everything else. You can't be insulting, obviously, but at the same time, you have to take that responsibility to educate. Because if you don't, we will continuously be lowered in our profile, right? And there, everything will be just do the average. I did the mix already. I did the temp dub, blah, blah. Okay. I wrote a very good paper years ago that was published in the CAS Quarterly, whatnot, called The Value of Temp Dubs. If you can ever get a hold of it, please read it. It's really important. And every picture editor I've ever given it to has said, I agree with this completely. It's like strange because I gave it to you because you're not doing that, at all.